The government was absolutely cavalier in not creating a tracking system. It was a horrific intentional policy to separate these children.
The ACLU, just one of the groups trying to help get these families reunited. Things so bad, the government resorting to taking DNA swabs of the families, trying to connect them that way. And we're also hearing horror stories from across the country. 1 2-year-old kids dragged to immigration courts, hysterically crying without any parent. Toddlers reunited with their families, but they don't even recognize the parents often because they were been separated for so long and at such a young age. Then there's the 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome who was separated from her mother, detained in Texas. It gets worse. Her father is here legally. But at least some of the kids, I stress the word some, are finally getting reunited with their parents. That includes this 6-year-old girl from El Salvador. Her family, they fled violence, including attempted kidnapping of little Allison. She was one of the children heard on that audio tape inside a detention facility in Arizona.
¿Cuáles son ustedes? ¿Y tú?
Guatemala.
No llores. Mira, ella te va a explicar y te va a ayudar. ¿Cierto, Consul?
¿Te va a pasar con su consulado? Papá.
To put it politely, the government is struggling to put these families back together, even though they've been ordered to do so by the courts. 3,000 of them were split at the border, and only 500 kids have rejoined their parents, and it has less than 2 weeks to reunite everyone, or it will defy a court order. Plus, the administration has not provided any updated numbers in more than a week, so we don't even know how many children we are dealing with. Joining me now, Karen Anderson, Director of Neighbors Link Community Law Practice. We're going to get into some of the cases that you've been dealing with directly, but to put context on this, it's not just bad. It is historically bad what's going on, that this was done intentionally, and we clearly see there was never any plan to reunite these families because they never even took names, let alone had any identifications as to when the time came to connect the families. They're starting from scratch here. It proves they never had any intention of putting mother and child together in many cases.
That's what it looks like, and it really is absolutely unprecedented. I've been practicing immigration law for 20 years, and I have never seen anything like this. I never thought in my wildest dreams that we would be seeing this now.
So to dispel some of the rhetoric we're hearing, when the president said that basically all the other presidents did it, he was forced by law to do the following, none of that's true.
Absolutely not. These were decisions that were made by this administration to follow these new policies pretty clearly for the explicit purpose of discouraging people from trying to come to the United States to ask for help.
In fact, the president reiterated that sentiment just before leaving for this European trip when he said, you know, they shouldn't come in here illegally here. Basically, they're getting what they deserve. Moreover, unless I'm missing something, we're not going to get happy endings in all these cases. There are going to be children that they won't be able to reconnect with their parents. Am I right?
That's what it looks like now, because it's just hard to understand how it's going to be possible for them to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, if I can use that analogy. These families are apart. They were in a fragile state when they came here, seeking the protection of this country, and we just don't have the systems in place to reunite them.
And finally, to put a human face on this, for some, they'll sit at home and say, hey, you know what, I feel bad, but these people are just trying to cut the line, break the law, you know, circumvent the system, the way the president makes it sound at his press conference today in Great Britain. You come in here and basically you're given a free ride. There's no laws in the books. To go through the trek that these people went through, imperiling not only they, but their young children's lives very often, they're fleeing not just violence here, but the threats of rape, murder, the worst atrocities imaginable, right?
Exactly. The idea that these people are lawless and seeking to break our laws and get some sort of free ride is preposterous. These people are fleeing lawlessness, they're fleeing violence, they're fleeing persecution, and they're coming to our country because of everything we have held ourselves out to be historically, a place of safety, a place of refuge, and a place of order. And that's all turned on its head now.
I also wanted to ask you about a case that I know you're working on personally, Enrique Perez. He is a Guatemalan man seeking asylum, and he was detained by ICE for 3 months in the county of Westchester, New York. Now, Neighbors Link helped pay Perez's bond, and they say that he was illegally detained by ICE. So explain that if you could, Carm, because there's confusion as to when ICE gets involved, when a person's detained, what is the proper law enforcement? When should you be forced to show your papers or not? How does it work?
Well, I will explain all that. I just want to quickly say that Neighbors Link represents Enrique, and we facilitated posting the bond, but members of the community and Enrique's family and friends helped get the money together, and I want to thank them for that. Now, what is supposed to happen is that immigration arrests somebody based on a detainer at the very least. As you know from other discussions we've had, we always say that people shouldn't be arrested unless there's a judicial warrant. There wasn't even an immigration detainer for this gentleman. He just happened to be standing at his friend's house in Mount Kisco waiting for his employer to pick him up when ICE officers approached he and his friend looking for another person. And Enrique made the mistake of believing the officers' representations when they said, we're looking for basically a bad guy, and as long as you're not doing anything wrong and you're not the bad guy, nothing will happen to you, but if you walk away, you're going to be in trouble. And my client isn't a criminal. He's no criminal record anywhere. He cooperated, and what he got was almost 3 months in a detention facility.
So how is it supposed to work? And more than that, what has changed in the last couple of years in terms of the line between law enforcement and immigration officers and how ICE kind of works in between the two?
Well, there's been a couple of big changes. First, in the past, the federal government made decisions about prioritizing certain individuals over others for immigration enforcement. The idea of law enforcement is it's supposed to make us safe. So the best way to do that is to focus law enforcement energies, including deportation efforts, against people who are hardened criminals and people who are threats to national security. That was the policy in the past, and that didn't get in the way of a large volume of deportations, I might add. What's happened now is now all bets are off, and there's no what I would call quality control. And the federal government's been very clear about that. If you're in front of us, we're going to get you. So that's one problem, because it's not making the public any safer to be arresting people like my client, who wasn't doing anything to anybody. The other problem is, because of that overbroad enforcement, now you've my client sitting in a detention center for almost 3 months before he got to see a judge. As soon as he saw a judge, we were able to make a case for him to explain why he should be released on bond. But he was sitting in jail. He was sitting in jail for 6 weeks before he even knew when his court date would be. Just think about this, that in this country, that somebody for any reason who hasn't been charged with any crime, no warrant, no nothing, could just be picked up and sat in a jail for 6 weeks, not knowing even when he was going to see a judge. That's what happened.
Have you ever seen it as scary as we've seen it in particularly the last few months here, but really the last year and a half?
I have never seen anything like this in my life, and I have seen a lot. I was very involved in advocating for communities that were impacted by the post 9/11 enforcement, the profiling of Arab, Muslim, and South Asian communities. That was a really frightening time for those folks when there was overbroad enforcement. This is just by orders of magnitude so much worse. And I think what your viewers need to know is that really there's so much at stake for all of this. This is not about something that happens to other people. This is about who we are as a country. And 50 years from now, people will be writing books about this. We need to think about how we want to be remembered.
And obviously things like travel bans and even the anecdotal violence that we're starting to see on communities, go back to where you came from and all the rest. I think we all have an idea where the germination of all this came from, but it is not a good look for America. Karin, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
When we come back, everyone, we are on Corruption Watch. Sounds familiar, right? There's plenty to look out for. Dean Skeller's corruption trial in the hands of the jury as we speak, and that is a day after convictions across the board at the Buffalo Billion case. Our Dominic Carter, he is on the case in Lower Manhattan at the courthouse. He'll join us with the latest.